Good morning, good afternoon. Welcome to the Camelot Innovation Hour. So happy to have you here. My name's Harvey Wade, and today we're joined by Tim Yorke. Camelot is a network of independent experts, consultants who are looking to change the insurance industry, helping each other to help you. So before we get going, as normal, the Innovation Hour is sponsored by Sonar. So I have a message to read from them, and then we get going, Mr. Yorke. So Sonar, if you're looking for your next insurance partnership, investment, or acquisition, you probably want to talk to Sonar. These guys work with over 50 of the world's largest insurers and reinsurers, helping to scout and connect with the best-in-class innovation. In addition to their SaaS platform, which tracks 3.5 million companies, they employ a team of researchers who can help you better map the market, identify new areas of growth, and provide insight on who to work with to accelerate your innovation activities. And they also have a splendid new report out there about the top 50 startups to watch for. So to get in touch or take a trial of their platform, head to sonar.global. You won't regret it. Tim, welcome.
Thank you, Harvey.
Thank you for joining the Innovation Hour. It's lovely to have you. So the title of this session is really looking at not just innovation, but actually in reality, innovation tends to cause a wee bit of disruption. So how do you manage that innovation disruption? How do you look at it? So Tim's here and we'll talk through his background. So Tim, I've known Tim for a little while now. Tim is a good friend of Camelot, has spoken at some events, and I went, I know Tim, he lives just up the road from me. Let's have a chat with Tim about what the chaos that he's caused in his past and how he's got through that. So just to make you aware, Tim, I always have to check, do that little bit of passport control, check that the photo looks like the actual person. So you pass, you're right, you can get through. Tim is an experienced C-level IT operations and transformation exec, specializing in the insurance and financial service sector. So Tim's led many and designed, led and delivered many transformation initiatives in many organizations requiring step change in ops and financial performance in the UK, in Europe and in the US. He has got in-depth experience in delivering strategic initiatives incorporating organizational technology and people change across all those elements of the insurance sector. Currently, Group Transformation Director for Benefact Group, which is a diverse family of specialist financial service businesses, people like Ecclesiastical, Lysets, Lloyd & White, but a lot more than that. But they're all driven by this shared ambition to do right by the customers and clients, united by a common purpose to give all available profits to charity and good causes. Being owned by a charity, Benefact Trust places good intentions above the foundation of the group. And actually, I still think you're the third largest giver in the charity giver in the UK.
Corporate donor, yeah, that's my hobby. Yeah.
I don't know whether you kind of quite hit the two yet. So whether insurance, investment banking, broking, or advising, every year business makes up the Benefact Group as a specialist in their respective field, and together they provide responsible, sustainable investment, protection of iconic buildings, World Heritage Sites, and trusted advice to people in business. Whew, that's quite a mouthful, but welcome, Tim.
Well done, that man.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us, Tim. So that's about you. Let me just stop sharing my screen. I'd love you to just, that's a kind of overview. Why don't you just give a brief overview of how did you get to here? You know, your journey to being a Benefact Group and how you've got passion about innovation, change, transformation, and enabling people to innovate.
Well, you know me well enough, Harvey, to know that I can't talk about anything briefly. So
I know, I thought I'd throw that in just to see how you do.
Well, I think, well, as with most people and most things from an insurance perspective, by accident. Yeah, I mean, I ended up in the insurance industry accidentally. I am, in fact, a philosopher by training. Don't know if that helps, but that's my background. Ended up in insurance accidentally, and then ended up, when I moved to the London head office of Commercial Union, as it was back then, I arrived a week before the first PC.
Come on, see you.
Right.
Yeah, come on.
Network. About a week before the first PC, and happened to be the only person who knew how to use one. Pre-Windows, never been completed project as a graduate. So the guy that ran the claims function came out and said, anyone know how to use one of these things? Stuck it on my desk and asked me to do something interesting. I started looking at processes that were currently done very manually, automated a couple of things for him, and then that was the beginning of it all. A couple of years later, big project to roll out one of the first distributed imaging workflow platforms in the UK, using some EU or EC as it was then funding to do that. That was all very exciting. Sort of small team of us, one chapter ahead in the Hammer and Champions book, re-engineering the corporation. Nobody will have read that or remember it, I don't think, but and doing it as we go, with a few people from what was the O&M department. This makes me feel very old.
Sorry.
Okay, so having done one of those, that was really me on that journey. Went off, did some consultancy, joined Impact Plus, and then after a few years, which is a niche process and technology consultancy, after a few years, left there with a few colleagues and set up our own. And then after that, I was a combination of consulting and exec type roles. Thoroughly enjoyed my time at Equity Red Star as it was, ERS as it became, managing the transformation of that from what was really a dying business into something which is now a really, really positive force in the market. So thoroughly enjoyed it. And then a few years ago, after some time at AXA, got approached by Benefact and came here, mainly to sort of drive around how do we get the business refreshed. It's had a great success story of growth, but now to carry on growing, it needs to become a modern insurer, and we're focused hard on saying how do we do that? How do we move from where we are to where we need to be to cover the next period in our growth and the next 250 million of giving.
Yeah, you're being quite diffident about your career because you did quite a significant stuff at AXA, I think, didn't you? So you were quite heavily involved there.
Yes. I was a COO for the commercial business in AXA, and again, I think at that point, sort of helping them over what does the future platforms look like and things like that. So I was there for 4 years.
Yeah. And tell me a little bit more. I mean, people don't tend to know Benefact Group. They've maybe heard of some of the brands underneath it, but how does that kind of all work? Because it's a mutual organisation, which I think is quite different, isn't it?
Well, it's owned. It has a single owner, which is a charity, which is the Benefact Trust. So that trust owns the business, and then what we have is the individual entities within the group trade as individual companies. Those all flow up to the Benefact Group, which then passes its profits onto the Benefact Trust. So we have broking and advisory as a division with about 30 brokers actually in there. You mentioned a couple, but quite a few in there. We have an investment management division, which is Eden Tree, if anyone's seen that, which regularly wins ethical investor sort of prizes. And then we have the insurance bit. We have Ansvar in the UK, which is specialist charity as much as anything, but expanding. Ecclesiastical, which obviously grew from the heritage of religious buildings, but then moved into sort of heritage buildings themselves and onwards, and then now does sort of specialist niche commercial. So it's an amazing place. It's I think it's fair to say very different from AXA, coming out of AXA and then into Benefact. But there's something about the purpose of the business which informs everything that happens within it.
Yeah.
And from an employee engagement point of view, is a remarkable thing to see.
Yeah. And having done some work with you, actually, it's not just a glib phrase that is said. It actually is the whole point of us working hard and being successful is so we can actually give more money away, which I think is very different to a lot of other insurers and those in the sector, which I think
it's been quite a challenge to me, Harvey. I mean, you would have heard me say that I don't really believe in culture.
Yeah.
As a word prior to this, I'm more interested in behaviour.
Yes.
Culture is an effect of behaviour. Although and therefore, when you come to look at transformation, you think, well, should we be trying to change the culture? Should we be trying to change the people?
Yes.
And then get ourselves to a culture that flows from that. Although I have to say, I've had to revisit my thinking, which I hate doing.
But aren't you a philosopher at heart? So isn't this what you're meant to do?
Change is for other people, Harvey. But it really have had to because the force and the effect of the culture in the Benefact Group is incredibly powerful, and either you work with it and use it to drive success, or you don't, and you're going to find yourself in difficulty.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. Okay, thank you. That's a really great overview of how you've got to here. And then what I was going to do is just kind of launch into the question of, does innovation have to be disruptive to be successful? What's your view?
I think innovation has to be disruptive to be innovation. I think if it's not disruptive, I suspect it isn't innovation. I think there's two ways we can change. We can evolve, which is essentially a process of adaptation to changes around you, and it's going to be gradual and it probably iterative, and those sorts of things, and that's a very positive way of changing. But that will operate within, so I'm going to use a long word here, within a kind of a paradigm. So you set yourself up, and within that paradigm you can continue to evolve and improve and polish and make it shinier. But you're going to get to a point where you are constrained by the factors that set that paradigm up, and you'll hit those limiting constraints, and unless you can break through those constraints, then you're not going to be able to continue to grow.
Yeah.
And therefore, and some of those constraints are really fundamental. I'm a big fan of Kurt Lewin. If anybody else is familiar, this goes back to the 40s, I think. The whole idea of unfreeze, change, and refreeze, because what your organization is a configuration of factors that allow you to perform in a certain way, and you configure those to sort of set your competitive advantage in stone and therefore exploit it in the market. That's great, and while it's working, change is evil and should be resisted at all costs, but over time that will start to wear away, and as you become less competitive, what you need is the ability to look at those limiting constraints and say, we have to make a fundamental change to take us to the next paradigm, which allows us to grow. And that means some quite fundamental disruption. That Peter Senge thing, sorry, I'm now just quoting old writers, the discipline of the second S. What you have to be doing is, whilst you're in that growth curve, whilst you're in that success curve, you've got to be starting the next one, because you don't want to be starting that when your curve peaks off, because there's time to get going. So I think you've got to be disrupting some of the fundamentals if you're really going to be doing innovation.
Yeah, just help people who may not be familiar with some of those, that S curve, some of the economics. Can you just sort of walk us through what you mean?
Sure. So if you look at any kind of business or any kind of operating model, you set yourself up. I'm going to use my hands now. I'm not sure if this is going to work, but you set yourself up, and to start with, it takes time for that to build up. So you're sort of going on a bit of a plateau, and then as it works, it starts to accelerate. And my hands are over there. I'm sorry, that's not working. So you accelerate up, and then you get to a point where you start to peak, and that will sort of, your competitive edge will disappear. And so quite often what happens is you get to the top and it all starts to slow down, and people think, oh, we should think about what's next. But actually, by that time, it's too late, because you've peaked, and then the next one's going to take time to get off. So you've now plateaued for a considerable period of time, and you're vulnerable. So you really, as you're in that curve, you want to be thinking about, when will this end, how will this end, and what's the next piece of innovation required to take us to the new operating model. And you need to be doing that at the same time. You need to be doing that whilst you're being successful. I think you sounds like sort of, I don't know, constantly thinking about the collapse and failure of your current operating model, even if you're successful, because you need to be thinking about where you're going to go after this, and that's the innovation mindset, I think.
Yes, I think it's really hard, isn't it, when you think, okay, I'm being successful, and let's make hay whilst the sun is shining, but it's actually always thinking about and we see it more and more, that what used to be stable is no longer the stability that we thought we were going to have. And I think that phrase of that S curve, I often call it about exploit and explore, and you've got to have this kind of ambidextrous mindset, which the challenge that you've got is, if you're exploring, you're actually using up resources and investment that actually could help you to be more successful in your exploiting. And so you almost have to have this view of, and I wonder in your view, Tim, of how conscious people are about, I have to have this dual mindset in operation, or whether people go, oh, we should have thought about that 2 years ago.
Well, I think the answer is not very. And I think in insurance, particularly, and maybe it's something to do with the nature of our industry, we don't tend to think about And I mean, just look at the fact that we have these hard and soft markets, don't we? Where
Yes.
and that is essentially built in us really not really thinking about and predicting for the future. We know, the market hardens and we all kind of get on the bandwagon until, we're now sort of making some money. And then somebody at some point thinks, oh, I just dropped the price a bit, I'll clean up. Somebody does, we all follow and back down the roller coaster till we hit the bottom and someone says, right, I'm putting the price up. It's not about growth, it's about, and we're following. That's very much kind of, it's sort of almost baked into the psyche of our industry. It's not doesn't feel like an efficient way to do this, but we are completely in it. And it represents that. Let's focus on what's right here, right now, and not so much on the long term. We don't really talk about R&D, for example. I mean, there's not many industries that would say I have no R&D function. And I think there's another part, and I don't know this, but it's controversial. I'll try not to be controversial because you're recording.
Oh no, please! I like controversy. It's good.
But I think
you are being recorded. Just to
yeah, that's fine. So I should just say this is a personal view. But have we really innovated anything in the insurance industry since the 80s? I mean, what we've done is improve and we've automated and but in terms of fundamentally what we do, I'm not sure really that very much has changed at a fundamental stage. Maybe we're an old industry and therefore some things are very well established. But we've taken a long time to undertake some fundamental change. I think I don't think this is controversial. I mean, the London market transformation. I mean, gosh, that's where are we now? Blueprint 2. I don't know if anybody's added up how much we've spent on transformation of the London market, but what have we really done? So I think it's sort of part of our psyche, but it doesn't have to be.
No, it doesn't. There's so many threads that I want to pull on, and I'm just trying to work out which ones we should. But I think one of the let's maybe bring it back to kind of we can go up in that direction. But I think you've led many transformation programs, and you've talked about this nature of freeze, unfreeze, or unfreeze, freeze, and re-thaw again. And I'm wondering if it's you love it, or you're really good at it and you just endure it, or whether there's some. I always hear it's interesting. You see some sports people that actually they're really good at sports, but they've actually fallen out of love with the sport while they first do it. And I wonder whether why do you keep putting yourself through the pain of a transformation program?
Yeah, that's a question that you always ask in the middle of the transformation program, partly because there's so much disruption going on. But for me, the whole heart of this is about possibility and opportunity. And we've probably all been there. You're in an organization that's going well, and therefore what you're trying to do is to run the operation effectively and efficiently. And you have a very quite a narrow type focus. You want to keep the machine working, and there's a very clear set of goals, and it's all about managing these numbers and you do what you can do to really drive it on. But that in some respects is quite a constrained environment to work in, because you understand the parameters, and it's about improving the performance within those parameters and driving it forwards. The difference with innovation is you suddenly open up the horizon, and so you start to talk about possibility. You start to talk about what things might be. They don't even the innovation activity doesn't have to go all the way through to implementation to be incredibly valuable. Just the process of going through the thoughts to get yourself to a picture of what the world might be itself can feed improvements to the way you do this. Yes. But by taking down the barriers and starting to think more broadly about what are the systemic constraints that we have to reconsider and understand so that we might change them to transform our operation, that's a very hopeful, positive kind of a process, and creates opportunity in people's minds, as well as panic and uncertainty and fear. But if nothing else, it's that sort of process. So as you go through that, you have you see. I'm going to sound a bit woolly now, Harvey. This is not how I work, but you do see people change.
Yes, you do.
It starts to change, and there's two aspects to that. There's kind of individual change that's part of that transformation process.
Yes.
But there's also collective change and team dynamics and group behavior, and it's trying to see those sorts of things merge together, and the change that people go through feeding that overall group dynamic improvement. And it's an amazing thing to see, and I think that's why I do it, I would say.
So see the people changing their
And
that philosophy kind of, there's maybe background of actually sort of, I wonder why people change, and they do, and it's maybe that back to your original fascination of seeing that conversation that you're sort of, I wonder if, and wonder what.
That's right. Yeah. Why is it? Maybe there's the philosopher in me. What if?
Yeah.
I mean, ERS was a great example for me. You know, that was an organization that was dying, you know, absolutely dying on its feet. And in some respects, it was a dreadful 3 years of replatforming everything and the organization and cutting out pieces that lost money and reshaping to get it back to where it was. But actually, the process that we went through to get through the journey that everybody went on and the people went on. And I think central to that was the vision. And I think that's a key part of what really transformation is doing, is to say, we have a vision, we have a North Star, we know where we're going. And because we know what that is, that gives us enough stability and a platform to say, well, let's challenge everything else. Yeah. Because we've all got alignment around that, the clarity of that strategic vision. It becomes empowering, it becomes enabling, it means you're allowed, it gives you permission to sort of ask the questions you need to ask, to challenge the things that needs to be challenged. And it just wakes everybody up and takes you on the journey.
I think that's interesting, because I was going to ask and start to sort of think about that. How do you get that engagement and buy-in? But I think one of the things that, well, I'm also aware I'm being recorded, but often when you ask insurance organizations what's your vision, they will give you a monetary target, which is not really a vision. It's not, you know, people can't really sort of really, okay, we want to grow to this, you know, 1 billion, 2 billion, 5 billion. And people go, I have no real concept of what that means for me. But I do think there's something that you have in Benefat Group of something people can get behind. And when you talked about ERS, this sort of, it's almost like you sort of almost started the work too late, and it's kind of like we need to actually start it when the times are good. So I'm just wondering how you get that buy-in and engagement, how you sort of get people on board to say we need to do something different, even though they can probably say, well, look, the sun's shining, Tim, what are you worried about? You know, is your name Noah, in other words? Do we really have to build the boat? Is there really a flood? So how do you start to get that, you know, that engagement and direction to be able to do it?
Yeah, so I think because you said there were going to be no theories, I'm going to chuck another one in. I mean, everybody's, I'm sure, come across John Cotter and the kind of 8 phases, and right at the beginning of that, he talks.
Be surprised. I don't know whether everybody has, because I always think everybody has, because it was so fundamental to me. But yeah. I've got, you know, John Cotter's The 8 Steps to Making Fundamental Change. Yeah. Google it. It's a brilliant HBR article.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, I can't get the book out of my bookcase, Harvey. I was going to show it to people, but he has 2, which is The Heart of Change and Leading Change. Most downloaded HBR article in history, actually.
Is it really?
Yeah. Although he started as, these are the 8 reasons your project will fail, and then when the book came out, he had to turn that into, these are the 8 things you have to do to make your project succeed. But right at the front of that is burning platform.
Yeah. What's
the burning platform? And that's why it's difficult when the sun is shining to say, you know, at some stage it's going to rain. Now, of course, we all know that, but the burning platform that you create needs to be focused on what we think the things are that currently drive our success that won't necessarily last. You know, these are the things that work now, but will they work forever? And you need to read the signs to get you to the point where you say, right, here are the things that we know are going to be a problem at some point in the future. There is a burning platform. Now, not everybody always feels that, so maybe you need to have a big bucket of paraffin and a Zippo with you to set fire to the platform to get the conversation going. But I think without the burning platform, there is no reason. There's no reason for change. In fact, I think if everything's working really, really well, you probably shouldn't change things.
Yeah.
At least not in the thing that's really working. But you need to be thinking about where are the threats, and what will those threats mean, and let's explore that so that we can create what would be the burning platform that we're going to need to address to drive the kinds of questions we've got to ask if we're really going to innovate.
Yeah.
And we see some of those things that, again, I know we're being recorded, we keep saying this, but I mean, for example, lemonade. I mean, that was really interesting, and we all sat there and said, this is going to completely, radically, totally transform the industry, and what are we going to do about it? And the answer was we didn't do much, but then not much happened. And that almost kind of lures you into a false sense of security. Again, 2 or 3 years ago, we were all talking about what happens when Amazon lands in insurance, or what happens when, and again, lots and lots of worrying about all of that, but without really revisiting the fundamentals. And in fact, not much has happened so far, although I still think we should be worrying about that. And there's lots of these sort of things come along, but they don't drive us to understand, well, really, what's the burning platform?
Yes. And I'm wondering whether you're right, that the burning platform doesn't really, it works, maybe not that well, so people tinker around the edges. And I'm just wondering, it is a kind of real challenge to kind of really think about that pressing the need. So rather than thinking about that burning platform, if you sort of then place yourself into organizations that you work with, how have you talked about that burning platform? What have been some of the key things that sort of it's probably almost painted the picture that if we don't do something, this will happen. How do you start to build those conversations? Where does it start?
Yeah, so I think, I mean, you were talking about strategy. You know, what does your strategy look like? And you're right, where your strategy just says, here are some numbers that are different from the numbers that we've got now, I'm not sure that's really a strategy. I think what that is it's an aspiration, it's a wish, it's what you'd like to do. What we need to understand is, in what way will the current operating model that works like this and has the following characteristics and has the following ratios between inputs and outputs and all that sort of stuff, why will that operating model, which generates these numbers at the moment, start to generate those numbers? Because by itself, without something changing, it won't do that.
Yeah.
And so we need to be really clear on what are the aspects of our operating model and the performance characteristics that will move from point A to point B to allow these numbers to be generated. They won't just happen by themselves. What would we need to change to enable us to get there? And do we think that's possible? I don't know if your underwriters currently have N amounts of GWP per underwriter and you want to grow substantially. Why? Are you just increasing cost exponentially and therefore potentially you're growing without profitability? Or what would need to change to allow you to reshape the fundamentals to say this is something that will generate the right kinds of outcomes? So the strategy needs to lead it, but I think it needs to be reflected in what are the limiting constraints of our operating model and how do we need to change that to allow us to get there?
Okay. I think we're taking that the strategy leads it. So what it's saying, starting is a conscious perspective from normally strategy lies with the leadership team and buying into that. How do you then flow that down to, it's very easy to kind of say, this is how we're changing things, but then actually getting the people that are actually doing the work to start to engage in, well, I've been doing it this way for 20 odd years and it's been very successful and I've been hitting my numbers ever since, and now you're changing what I do, and how do I learn a new way of doing things? How do you start to buy in at that level?
Right, well, there's lots of questions in that. Right, so let me say 3 things. So first of all, I think innovation is a team sport. So whilst it's definitely top down, because it needs to be enabled and empowered from the top, the people that really understand how things work are the people that do it now. So I think you have to engage people in the process, and if that is well facilitated and managed, that allows people to understand and be part of the process of understanding where are the constraints that we're going to bump into in the future, and therefore what would we need to do, then I think by engaging them in that process, you're taking them on the journey with you. It's not like I know where we're going to go. I know what we're going to do. It's not strategy in that process. Now I need to engage you by explaining this to you so that you can understand it properly and you'll follow. When we're talking about innovation, I don't know where we're going to go, but I know that these are the issues that we have to think about for the future. And therefore, let's all of us get engaged in how we think through what this is going to mean for our competitive performance, for our success, where are the threats, what would we need to do differently, what fundamental things will we need to change to allow us to get there. I mean, AI is a great example of all this, isn't it? I mean, we all buy into the idea that AI is going to fundamentally transform our business. Interesting as you talk to people from different organizations about what is it they're actually doing to sort of understand that and test it out.
Yeah.
I think it's reasonable to say, if you're sitting there trying to produce, I don't know, a 5 to 10 year strategy, that by the time that strategy delivers, this will not be the same industry.
No.
It'll be fundamentally different, possibly not even recognizable in some ways. So how are we thinking about that from an innovation point of view, and what it means for us as businesses, and how we're going to be addressing that in the future, and what do we do now to start ourselves on that second S, even though everything's fine at the moment? How do we start the second S?
There's an interesting question from James, who's asked, and he's asking you about picking up on the idea that nothing much has changed in the industry over the past 4 or 5 decades. No, it's Tim, in your view, what would the fundamental positive change look like when it comes to the value the industry delivers?
I think it's a multifaceted question, because I think we probably need to break the industry up a bit, because it's not just a single thing. It's not just a single thing, and so therefore there would be different sectors that would be responding in different ways. And if you look at the London market, I think everybody sort of knows what the answer is. This should really become data exchange, and actually the whole thing could be radically different if we could just get ourselves to a point where we said these are the data points that we should be freely exchanging amongst ourselves in an electronic market of risk. And I think we know where we're going. Problem is actually getting enough of the stakeholders across the board bought in and being prepared to fundamentally challenge the operating model to get us there. I think data is key to all of this, though, because at the moment we still operate on the basis of, as I'm an insurer, you will bring me the data, and you'll bring me the data. I will then go away and I'll think about it, and then I will come back to you, and I will give you the outcomes of my wisdom and opining. Now, in some of the sort of direct space, that happens all very quickly and happens by machine. But again, it's pretty much a black box to anybody. And at that bottom end, that transactional end, we've managed to turn that into a race to the bottom, where there's really no margin for anybody. In there. But given where we are going with data and the availability, and what that potentially means for our ability to transact with our customer groups, this could come the other way. Because in fact, if we could get ourselves to a place where Harvey Wade is interested in insurance for his spectacularly successful consulting business, that data is probably all gatherable from somewhere, and the nature of the interaction between Harvey Wade and the insurer could be completely different. And that could be the same in a number of different ways. The way we do this, we know an awful lot. We could know an awful lot, and we could completely, I think, change the information flow, and therefore the options that we create for people by using all of that. Now, I mean, sorry, James, that's a bit off the top of the head. I'm not sure that's totally well thought through, but I don't know if anybody's tried using GPT-5 or something like that to put your postcode in and your house number and ask for a risk assessment. Do a few prompts to say, give me a risk assessment from an insurer's perspective of what this looks like. It's very, very good. I mean, it's really, really good.
Well, I think that's really interesting, because I think what you're basically, I think, saying is that insurance isn't really changing in a way that the world seems to be changing in sort of in terms of expectations that people are, how they're living, how they're making decisions, how they are interacting with individuals and data. And so we're kind of forcing them to work in a certain way. And I mean, I see this with my kids, and it's like, well, just call them. And they're like, I don't call people, I text people. It's like, what do you mean you text people? It takes ages. Just call them. You get no. And you're like, and then you're seeing like you just think that's because they're teenagers. And then you see this, you know, as people come into the workplace, they are like, well, I don't call people. I you know, we're sort of on, you know, other things, and they've got this sort of lack of, you know, sort of million things going on at once, and this lack of focus. But actually, that's where how people are interacting. I think it's maybe that changes, sort of insurance is having to change because of how the. I'm rather thinking actually, how could we make this easier? And I think you know, there's a lack of you know, generations never understand each other. They will think they're just being weird, either way. And I wonder whether there's this generational change that is starting to hit insurance, and people going, actually, we do need to do something differently.
And that's why this is a team sport.
Yeah.
Isn't it? Because different perspectives are really important. And if you're going to innovate successfully, what you need is everybody across the board engaged to participate in that process of innovation around a shared understanding of what we think we're trying to tackle, what's our North Star, what's the key question we're trying to answer, and then let's bring those different perspectives to bear. I mean, I don't know if this is true or not, but I've just had the observation. If you look at young companies, they often innovate better than established companies. And I wonder if part of that is the fact that you actually don't have kind of stratification of people in different roles, as you do have in a well-established company, you know, with age barriers and with whatever else you have throughout the organization. Younger organizations, flatter, people with more shared characteristics. It's just easier to get people aligned around a common challenge.
Yeah. The incumbents never normally disrupt the industry. There's a phrase I often use: "There's no candle manufacturer ever wanted to invent the torch." You know, you don't see people, you know, who are good in horse and cars developing motor cars. It's kind of, why would they do that? The only good example that I see immediately is when Apple decided to put music on the new iPhone, which fundamentally blew up their most successful division, which was iPods.
Yeah.
But they had to do it. It's like sometimes, like, well, why would I do that? And I think it's this sort of S curve of actually being aware that when you're doing the S curve, you could actually cannibalize part of your business.
You can't. I mean, you must, because almost the part of the process is to recognize that even at its strongest point, it's on the dusty road to death.
Yeah.
And therefore you need to be thinking about, I mean, there's great examples. I mean, Apple's a great example. There's some great examples of ones that didn't do it. I mean, nobody decides who wants a smartphone, having been through, you know, decades of innovation and completely transforming it, suddenly gets to a point where it dominates the market. And the 6210 was fantastic, but nevertheless,
Who didn't have a Nokia?
Kodak invented the digital camera.
Yeah.
But said no, because no one's going to need film anymore.
And GM released the first electric car in 1994, and then crushed them all because it destroyed the way that their dealers operated. So with that kind of link, and I do see some of the other questions, I will bring them in. How do you take your customers, who might be your brokers but also your end customers, with you on that change? Do you take them on your change, or do you have to find new customers? How do you sort of engage with that, which maybe don't have the same purpose-driven perspectives that you do within?
Yes. So I mean, I think the question is difficult. It's difficult because if you're saying to your customers, would you like to come on this journey with me? If they say no, then what do you do?
Yeah.
And in some respects, you know, I mean, that's the London market, isn't it? I mean, you need all the stakeholders aligned, and if somebody says no, then you're stuck. So I think the key needs to be that what you are producing, what you are doing as an organization has got a purpose. It's got an economic model. It's got, you know, from your perspective, it's got a USP and why you're going to be successful. The only reason you're going to be successful is if you have aligned your delivery and your outcomes and your products to what customers need. And then I think the question you then have to ask is, am I targeting the right customers with the thing that I think is going to generate the right amount of return for me as an organization? I'm getting the right thing. And I don't think that means you leave customers in the dirt. You don't. Once they're your customers, you have some responsibility. But how long do you carry on providing something which is actually not part of what you think you can do well and successfully, because there are customers that don't. And I'm sure there are some customers who still want a Nokia 6110. I know I do, but I can't have one. I can have one actually, but you know what I mean. I mean, it's not that. Where are you on that journey? I don't think all customers necessarily will go with you.
No.
But what you're doing ought to be good for customers, because if it's not good for customers, you're not going to succeed. Yeah.
It's that. I think it's back to that conscious piece, isn't it? It's being really aware of who you're of. It's conscious, but also being aware of the needs that your customers have, and understand it. And I think it's you see some of these things that are decisions are made on a spreadsheet, but without understanding. In terms of the example I really love is, as more supermarkets go for self-service checkout, which I personally hate with a passion, because why do you need to video at the top of my forehead? I don't know, but anyway, but when you
good looking man, Harvey.
well, not when the lighting is, that's not the best image anymore. But one of the things that I think is in the Netherlands, they've actually created, I can't remember the customer, they've actually created a slow checkout lane. So for people that actually maybe don't get out very often, and actually buying their shopping is getting to see, the outside world, and then they interact with the checkout. But this is a slow checkout, i.e. people will chat for ages on this. So if you're in a rush, don't go here. But I think it's understanding those needs. Some people do want this, I'll do it myself, and so, check it all myself and do that all stuff. Some people want to sort of still do that, but it's given those different options, I think. So I think that's just one of the things to I think be aware of those different needs, and being consciously aware of what you will meet and what maybe.
Yeah, what are you targeting? That's the thing, because I think you know what you're trying to do, and you know how you're trying to do it, and if it's making sense, then there's a model that suits all of those things. I think one of the questions is that model, does one organization serve every single one of those different types of models, or actually is there a model that really works when it's targeting the people that really need something which others might not be able to respond to? I always reflect back on Sabre. Does everyone? I mean, I'm sure they're still around. Really, really clear proposition for a very, very niche group of probably underserved customers, and that's a fantastically successful business model.
I tell you what, I was just thinking as you were talking about it, I was thinking of, there are music artists, and I know you're into your jazz, and I was just thinking about one of them. In my early years, I was quite into Harry Connick Jr., and I quite like he did a lot of jazz. And then all of a sudden he went far more into a sort of a New Orleans like swing jazz, and literally there's videos of his concerts where they all thought they'd come for a bit of soft jazz, and all of a sudden he kicks in with it, and he's just like, well, bye. This is who I am. So I think it's kind of being aware that you're going to lose customers, but actually sometimes being true to who you are. But I think it's really interesting of accepting that you will have this churn, and you can't be all things to all people.
I think you can't. That's right. Because I think if you try to be all things to all people, then you won't really be anything to anybody.
Be Magnolia, won't you? Or be Page. So
exactly right. Yeah.
There's a question here that Arnold, I always mismash your name, I'm really sorry. Success has many parents around innovation, but yet failure is an orphan. What's your experience of managing both those phenomena of having, taking merit for the positives, but avoiding that blame game?
I've managed to work that very well. No, that's the wrong answer. I think when we're talking innovation here, I think the concept of success and failure is a difficult one, because a quote failed innovation is itself not necessarily a bad thing, because in nothing else you've learned something in that process. When you come to sort of transformation type projects, large scale transformation type projects, then I think again success and failure are the right terms, but they're terms that you adopt, hopefully not in terms of the whole this 5-year process that you're in, but you try to break your transformation down so you're clear on what you're trying to do, and you're doing it in as shorter chunks as you can possibly achieve, so that you stop regularly enough to allow you to learn. But every part of that process is learning, and if you can do that, if you can sort of create a much more kind of modular approach to some of these components that builds that learning in, I think what you're doing is reducing the numbers of opportunities for failure, or if nothing else, reducing the scale of that failure as it happens. It's totally inevitable. I mean, I suspect all of us in the room have encountered some hideous nightmare of a technology project that's crashed and burned, and quite often when that's happened, you try to keep the thing alive. You try to keep it alive as long as you possibly can, because the concept of success and failure is so kind of final, when actually you probably all know that you should much sooner have looked at that and said, I can see where that's going, let's shoot the puppy. It's time to do that. And no, that's to say, sorry, I'm not, it's a very long answer here. The key thing here is just total transparency.
We do not allow dogs to be killed on this program.
Right, yeah, sorry, no puppies were injured in
the I don't mind about that, but that's fine.
But I think it's we just need complete transparency. Not everything will work, and therefore some things will fail. And if you never try anything, you never fail. So I think just being clear, and also being clear about what success and failure means. Let's get that really well defined. We know what we're trying to achieve, and we've either achieved it or we haven't. And if we haven't, we can learn and move on.
It comes back to that vision. You're really clear about why you're doing it, and you're also clear that we actually don't know all the answers, and we're going to try things. And I think which is why it's probably needs to be really talked about, as in if you engage the people that actually really know what's going on, i.e. the people doing the work, they will tell you what the customers are saying, what this is. I mean, I guess one of the challenges within that is when you're trying to do a totally new thing, your current employees don't really understand that new thing, or in that sort of old way, and you're going to do it. It's a different generation, and how do you take? Sometimes it's about taking those generations and learning from each other. And there's a really nice view that a lot of the Broadway stars, musical shows, they have young actors that come in, paired with the sort of we've been doing this for years, and so the new actors bring a fresh way of looking at things, but the older ones saying, this is how you manage your energy, this is how you manage to do 7 shows a week kind of stuff, and they really start to work in that kind of way. So I think you have to build that understanding what each person brings if they get into the vision. I think the nice thing about Benefact, you have got this such clear purpose of why you're doing it. The reason we are being successful is we can actually give more money away, and I think I see that throughout, and it's not just a glib statement, it's actually what people believe and live by.
Well, and also it allows you to kill things early. Here we are, we're on this journey, we're learning some things. Is this going to give us anything? Let's as early as we can, let's focus in on it and say, no, that's not going to get us there, let's kill it. And there's some thinking that goes, actually, Harvey, I was just about to give you an answer to a question you're going to ask me later, so I won't do that.
Okay,
I'll save that.
So I think we've answered a lot of questions. Where are we? There's a great note from Gary, thank you, saying when he worked at Aegeus, regarding in the slow lanes, we allow customers in Aegeus claims to take as long as they wanted when reporting claims, so they often wanted to talk about the trauma of it, but it actually saved money in the long term.
See, I think that's absolutely brilliant. I think it's a brilliant example, because it does really challenge a constraint. If you look at so many of the call center type examples, you're measured on call times, you're measured on utilization, you're measured on all these things. I had a claim recently, I'll keep names out of it to protect the guilty, where I contacted the person I thought I was insured with to get a very long, nearly 3.5 minute telephone message explaining that the insurance had been outsourced to so-and-so, who'd outsourced the administration to so-and-so, who'd outsourced the claims to so-and-so, and you were just about to be transferred. I was transferred, and I got a message that said, if you have experienced any trauma or are feeling any emotional, call someone else. We're not trained for this. We don't do it. We strongly suggest that you get some help from somewhere else and don't be mean to our staff was basically the message. And as a claimant, that it wasn't a very positive experience. So I mean, I think Gary's example is a brilliant one.
Yeah,
you're probably right. You get a better outcome if you say, what's the fundamental constraint we're addressing? If the fundamental constraint is the operating model is get off the phone. Actually, what if we took that constraint away?
yeah.
What would that mean? How would that change outcomes? Let's try that and see what happens. It's just a great example.
No, I think it's about challenging that perspective of why we actually here. And sometimes you get so focused on the operational role and the metrics. And I think often what happens is that people, we've got to measure how people are doing, and they don't actually spend enough time really thinking about those metrics, and they're fairly crass. And I know Gary well, but there are lots of sort of input measures like how long on the phone, how many people are dealing with calls, how many calls have they dealt with in an hour, and you go, well, and people then use NPS scores, which actually everybody knows how to really not. If a customer asks you what your NPS score, you just give them a 6 because it really winds them up, and you just think people know how to play those things. But I think it's something about that recommendation piece, and have you really solved some of these challenges? Getting back to that needs, isn't it? Do we really understand what we're here for? And sometimes people forget that.
And if we really understand that, we can look at our current way of working, look at where we've put the constraints in there, and say, what if we dismantled that? What if that wasn't the case? What would the outcome look like?
Yeah.
How would it be different? And would that be a good thing? Or
one of the things I always say to people is, how do you get out of the building? How do you really get out of the building and really go and speak to like real people? When was the last time you talked about insurance with your mates down the pub? And were you defending it, or were you kind of really understanding it? And it's kind of it's really interesting. We don't really talk about a lot of these things. I love kind of when I run a course with one insurer where literally I go, okay, right, you now have to go and talk to people. Have you arranged that? No, you now need to go and talk to shopkeepers about what their life is and what their world is in their normal market, where now instead of 5 days a week, everybody's coming in, people are just coming in 2 days a week, and they don't need to get their dry cleaning done with you anymore. So what are you doing? And just getting the emotional.
It'll take you 20 minutes to get a pint in the Lambo.
Yeah, I know. I think that's why people go early, don't they? Just to get past the queue. So I don't know. But they have to stand outside because their gilets are just making them too hot when they stand in, aren't they? So right, let's just finish before we had too much bashing of the London market. So let's just finally, Tim, just to sort of bring this to a close. This has been a fascinating conversation. Very philosophical question, which I think is fabulous. So back to your roots. Just as we close, what would you think are your top 3 tips for helping leaders to successfully manage the disruption that innovation causes?
Okay. Yeah, there's probably more than 3. I won't get them in the right order, but here we go. I think first thing what you have to have in your business is you have to have new thinking going on all the time. I think if you're not doing the R&D, if you're not thinking about what comes next, if you're not thinking about it, and it doesn't have to be concrete, it doesn't have to be something you're necessarily going to operationalize, but I think you need to be doing the thinking so that you can capture the learnings and then feed that into the rolling plan that you've got. And out of that will come strategic initiatives, out of that will come change. But I think for innovation to thrive, you've got to be doing that new style thinking and exploring and thought experiments and all that sort of stuff. And of course, in an operation that starts to generate disruption because everyone's now thinking, oh, what's going to happen? Where are we going to go? What's the plan? And at this point, of course, there is no plan, because we're sort of working our way through that and understanding it. So I think then the only thing you can do with that disruption is to embrace it.
Yeah.
This is part of the process. So, back to Lewin, unfreeze, change, and then structure and focus. The unfreezing means you have to go in there and challenge the things that have been solidified as part of that construct and undo them. So that is obviously going to say, well, hang on a second, I used to be a left-handed floggle toggle manufacturer, and now there's going to be no left-handed floggle toggles. What am I going to do? And the point being, well, I don't know, let's all work on this together.
Yeah.
And let's be part of that. So you have to embrace it, I think. And I guess that's just another way of saying, get the second S running.
Yeah.
We need to keep that keep that moving. But and then the third one is, yes, embrace the disruption, but to as far as you can, keep it constrained. You don't have to disrupt everything all at the same time. And I think part of this is to say, what, if we've got a series of constraints, which one are we going to think about? Let's focus on this area over here. Let's do that sort of thinking around innovation and where we might go. Recognize there's some disruption over there, but let's keep that within boundaries, because we're not throwing everything up in the air all at the same time. We're focusing on something, we're identifying what the learning is, capture that learning and either deploy it, because that's great, we've now got good benefits, or take the learnings and move on, and now let's address somewhere else. So keep it constrained, but embrace it, rejoice in it. This is what change feels like.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for those insights. Been splendid. It really has. Let me just share my screen, because I just want to get everybody interested in what we're going to be doing next. So no, it's not. It is sharing. So next month we have Hayley Maynard. For those that don't know Hayley was the head of innovation at Chaucer Group, and has recently, in the last 6 months, moved to Atrium. She is actually Dr. Hayley Maynard. She's super smart. One of the really interesting challenging how things are going, very interesting perspectives in terms of disrupting how she's trying to do things, how insurance is done. I think that QR code takes you to the invite list. The other piece I just wanted to share, and I'll put it into the chat window, is all the episodes that we've actually run on the Innovation Hour, and then I think we're almost up to 30, we might be at 30, is we actually have a YouTube playlist. So you can go in and watch many episodes of me talking and some of our guests talking. But we've got really interesting people. We had obviously had Andre Deprez last month talking about from McGill & Partners, talking about AI agents, but we also had Arsene Hanini, who's Chief Innovation Officer at Viva. We've had people from Cisco, people from rail industry, lots of different folks. So do join that. But I just wanted to say thank you very much. Oh, and if I go to the next slide, I think there's a QR link to the YouTube channel. I was being very efficient when I was doing this, but just wanted to say thank you very much for joining. Tim, thank you for your time. It's been so insightful.
I've enjoyed it.
And thank you for giving us your insights, your honesty, your transparency. It's been wonderful to hear, and with that sort of sprinkling of humor as well. It's been wonderful. Thank you all for joining. Have a wonderful rest of the day and a great weekend when you get to it. If you listen to the recording, have a great day wherever you are. Thank you very much. See you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.